All right, welcome. Great, we have sound. Okay, so welcome to everybody around the world and welcome to all my subscribers. Just adjust that a little tiny bit. So today I'm not going to take much of your time, but I've got a selection of verses to read. Now, 10 of these verses show, which is more than enough. Well, the cat just jumped on the table. But 10 of these verses show that the end days events that we hear about in the Bible, starting with, arrival of Jesus, all the great space rocks or meteors or fiery stars that are colliding down into the earth, all the great terrible events, the releasing of fallen angels and legions upon the earth, and the great culmination, with the resurrection, the translation of the people, and the ascension, aka the true final rapture that occurs. Uh, the gathering of everybody by the angels. All these events that we hear about actually take place in a 1 hour time span. Now, I myself never even used to believe this for the 20 years of my life I've done my studies until recently, in the last few years or so, where I found in doing my systematic theology, for example, where I found all these verses that specify everything will take place in an hour. So, technically speaking, when Revelation talks about, seven trumpets, seven seals, and seven vials, not even technically, but realistically, all of those events that are spoken about are going to take place in a 1 hour span. Now, if you're forsaken at judgment, you might get stuck if you survive that thus far, all the other things up till then. You will be condemned to stay on the earth based on Revelation chapter 9. And you'll be tormented for up to 5 months by those things that are on the earth. Why is the cat jumping around so much? So, but everybody needs to take this seriously and understand that the Bible actually does say that everything's going to take place in an hour. Now, why is that important? Well, it's important because a lot of Christians out there in the world, and this is a separate matter I'm not going to get into, but a lot of Christians in the world, a vast majority, I would say, believe that there's going to be this 7 year tribulation period. And because of this, they think that, in the back of their mind, subconsciously, they're thinking, oh, there's going to be a very obvious buffer zone, an indicator of when the end is coming. A lot of Christians tell me and preach that, we know the end days aren't near because there haven't been 7 years of tribulation yet. But as I've proven in my books and in both of my books, I think, and in all the videos that I have, the 7 year tribulation is not even biblical. It's based on this really ridiculous concept from the book of Daniel. I could get into it very quickly, right? In the book of Daniel, he talks about 490-year period, right? He didn't say it's going to be 490 plus 2,000. He said 490 years. When you count numbers, they go one after the other. So it's 490 years from start to finish, right? So when Jesus died in the 483rd year, they're 7 years after Jesus died. But what all these other Christians have done for so long is they take some magical scissors and they cut those final 7 years off for no reason, no valid reason whatsoever, and they fast forward it 2,000 years in time to the end. Okay, so at any given year, these Christians who use this theory can just claim, oh, the end is coming. This is the start of the final 7 years. And they do that all the time. You always see it happen, these charlatans, right? And it's just an illogical concept and it's not biblical, right? God said there's 490 years from 1 to 490. They go one after the other. So that means 7 years after Jesus died was the end of that. Okay, you don't have this 2,000 years forward because then God would have said 2,490. You follow me? Or 2,000 and, you know what I mean, and adding on the final 24 years or whatnot. So it's an illogical concept. There's many other reasons why it's disproven. But I think Satan has come up with this concept because what he's done is he's fooled so many Christians. I mean, hundreds of millions of Christians, or over a billion Christians or more, and they really think there's going to be 7 years of tribulation at the end. But nowhere in the Bible does it say there's going to be 7 years of tribulation. They literally just derive it from the prophecy of Daniel, and it's illogical to do that. So nonetheless, without getting further into that, that's the problem. So a lot of people in the world have this concept. A lot of Christians think, oh, we're going to get this huge buffer zone where it's going to be very obvious that the end of days are approaching. That is not going to happen. There's three famous verses. I have two of them here. But there's another famous verse where Jesus says, everybody's going to be saying peace and surety, and then there will be sudden destruction. Okay? Now, you can't be living in a 7-year tribulation period with some antichrist ruling the world and, you know, downtrodden on Christians and all that, like these charlatans portray. You're not going to have that, because that's not peace and surety, is it? Jesus said that you're going to be saying peace and surety. Everything's going to be normal and fine, you know, for the vast majority of people, depending where you live. Everything's going to be normal life, right? And then sudden destruction. That's what Jesus said. And the other two examples I have here is be like the days of Noah. In the days of Noah, everybody was oblivious to the imminent end, and it suddenly came. And he also gave the example of Sodom and Gomorrah, right? So I have those verses to read as well. So in this lineup of verses, we can see that the end days events actually take place, according to Jesus, because he's the one who's saying all these, in 1 hour time span. Now, this is important because in reality, just like Jesus warned us, it's going to be like the days of Noah. It's going to be like the days when Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed, okay? And it's going to be a normal everyday life until suddenly all this occurs. And it's all going to occur very quickly within an hour. Now you stop and think about it. My video here might be 15 minutes. Maybe it'll end up being half an hour. That's basically half the time span. So in that time span, half of the book of Revelations could unfold. So at the end of the day, in the book of Revelation, we have 7 trumpets, 7 seals, and 7 vials. As I've shown, Kitty, hey, don't scratch the chair. Let me let the cat out 1 sec. Kitty, don't scratch the chair, okay? You want to go scratch the tree? Okay. Anyways, I'm scratching up all my furniture. So sorry for that. But you have 7 trumpets, 7 seals, and 7 vials. Now, as I talk about in the book in detail, with a chapter devoted to this, with all the scripture on the page to prove it, God has clearly shown us something that everybody else has taken for granted. For example, the 7 trumpet, seal, and vial all describe the same one thing meticulously. There's like 5 different descriptive words, and they are all repeated in each of the 7. So therefore, the 7th of each of those is talking about the same one event. It mentions, if I can remember off the top of my head, thunders and lightnings, voices in the heavens, an earthquake, and great hail. Okay? So the 7th trumpet is the same events as the 7th seal, which is the same events as the 7th vial. Okay? And I believe offhand it's the same for the 6th of each, where it gets to the 5th. So there's slight variance. They don't all line up like 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2, 3, 3, 3, but a lot of them do line up, especially towards the end. So I detail all their parallels in the book, and it's not my invention. It's literally based on what God describes them as. Okay, one of the trumpets talks about the sun going into darkness and stars falling. One of the seals mentions exactly the same thing. It's not rocket science, right? So God has made it abundantly clear. But most people haven't done a deep study, and they don't even know about this. I haven't heard a single other person out there describe that. So the book of Revelation was written, as we are taught, to be confusing. And it was taught like that because it was given during the times of the Roman Empire, and Christians are being persecuted, right? And they're about to go into even worse persecutions and whatnot. So the book was written very confusingly, and most Christians understand that, right? So processing what I just said with that, the book is written confusing, but don't let it confuse you, because God pinpointed these 7 trumpets, 7 seals, and 7 vials, and really they're all taking place along the same one time frame, which, as we learn from these 10 verses, is just the span of an hour. A lot of these verses are actually from Revelation, right? So all of these events that we hear about, 7 trumpets, seals, and vials, are going to take place within 1 hour. Okay, so process that. You're going to be here living a normal daily life, like the days of Noah, saying peace and surety, just like before Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed by heavenly fire suddenly. It'll be like a normal day. What prelude are we going to get? The only prelude we're going to get, based on the scripture, is the armies of Gog and Magog, whoever they may be, attacking Israel, and I think specifically Jerusalem. Okay, now if we look out in the world, this is already happening. We have those certain groups out there in the world, and especially the latest one the last few days, firing thousands of rockets, doing all these attacks. So the foundation for this is already happening. Okay, so the Old Testament, the Tanakh prophecies say that these armies, Gog and Magog, will surround Israel and Jerusalem and will attack it, and then God and Messiah will arrive with heavenly fire and great hail. The same thing Revelation talks about, right? So that's the only prelude we're going to get. And if you look in the world, that is already starting now. I mean, firing 7,000 missiles at Israel. You know what I mean? Now, they have fired a lot of missiles, various peoples have, at Israel for a very long time. But the other thing we have to realize is this. As I've said in my books and in my videos, Jesus clearly answered the disciples when they asked him, what are the signs that the end is imminent and you're here? In one of the verses, Jesus said, when you see the fig tree growing new shoots and putting out new leaves, new growth, new shoots, depends on your translation. This specifically refers to Israel. Israel is called the fig tree in the Tanakh in prophecies. Okay, the fig tree regrowing new shoots shows the rebirth of Israel. The rebirth of Israel historically took place in 1948, like I've talked about in countless videos and in my books, right, such as my End Days book. Okay, my books are available on Amazon. Now, in 1948, according to what Jesus said, he was nigh at the doors. That's what he said in that verse. So that's one of the preconditions. That's like the cornerstone. That's one of the preludes, right? So for the end days to arrive, we would have to have Israel reborn. After many, 2,000 plus years, it did take place. Okay, or 2,000 years, it did happen. Israel was reborn. That was the first condition. The first, what's the word? Prerequisite. Okay, the next one is that the armies of Gog and Magog, who are just termed nations, doesn't specify exactly who they are, but it does say that the final beast kingdom would be the opponent of Israel. But nonetheless, without fussing, various nations would be attacking Israel. We do see that happening now. So we do have the prerequisites for the end days to occur. And we have to keep in mind it'll be like the days of Noah, like the days of Sodom and Gomorrah, and we'll all be saying peace and surety, normal everyday life, and then sudden destruction. Okay, when the sudden destruction comes, those 7 trumpets, 7 seals, and 7 vials, don't be deluded by these false teachers out there. Okay, one thing that you must understand, and this is in my verse line up here, Jesus, we are told, comes with the final trumpet. That means whether you like it or not, you as a Christian and anybody else out there who's going to be worthy, we have to stay here through all the 7 trumpets, which also includes all the 7 vials and all the 7 seals. We don't get snuck out of here before anything. We have to stay here through everything. And the verse lineup and other verses like in Revelation chapter 9 tells you that. Revelation chapter 7 and chapter 9, both of these talk about how bad things and bad beings will be on the earth doing bad stuff. And they are told by God and the angels, do not touch those who are getting sealed or who have the seal of God. Okay? So we're told that in chapter 7 and 9. So that's another piece of evidence that the good will still be here when all that havoc is and wrath is being unleashed upon the world. But the other verses show we'll be here until the 7th trumpet, the very, very end. That's when Jesus arrives. That's when the resurrection occurs and yada, yada. Okay, so, but a lot of Christians aren't aware of that. So if you ask the average Christian, I would say probably 2/3 of the Christians in the world believe that we're going to have 7-year buffer zone where some antichrist is ruling the world. Little do they know that already took place with Islam a long time ago. But nonetheless, right, they're waiting for that. So they're not going to be prepared. It's going to come suddenly. And to make it even worse, everything that is spoken of is going to take place in an hour. Okay, and that's why Jesus warned. They're going to be saying peace and charity and then sudden destruction. That's why he warned it's going to be like the days of Noah. And that's why he warned it's going to be like the days of Sodom and Gomorrah. In Sodom and Gomorrah, nobody in there knew that it was going to be suddenly destroyed by heavenly space rocks and fire. The angels appeared to the only righteous people and took them out of there in time. Took them out of there so close to the destruction point that when Lot's wife turned around, she was destroyed by looking at the destruction. Okay, so just like that is going to be the end days. Okay, and you have, like I said, probably 2/3 of Christians out there who have no clue. They haven't processed this, and they think they're going to have all this prep time and preliminary warning, and it's not going to be like that. Okay, so the only prelude and preliminary warnings that we'll get are Israel being reborn. That was 1948, and the opponent nations to Israel mounting up against Israel and attacking it, which is happening undeniably right now. Okay, they're not surrounding Jerusalem and all that, but it's already starting. So we can't deny that according to Jesus, at any given day or moment, all of these things could start unfolding. Okay, and be careful. Don't listen to all these other charlatans and false prophets out there. You don't have to believe me, but I'm just, I'm telling you, Gotta believe me, right? But you don't have to. It's up to you. But don't believe these other charlatans out there. They'll have you looking in every other direction, and you'll be caught by surprise. So here's the proof. Here are the verses that everything takes place in an hour. Okay, and it's not my opinion that it does. So here we go. Okay, I have the 10 verses where it says it takes place in an hour, and I threw in, I don't know, 4 or 5 other verses where it talks about how quickly it will transpire, like Jesus comes like lightning. I have a few of those, right? So altogether, it's got a few other ones that don't mention the hour, right? Just keep that in mind, right? So in Luke 14:17, this is one that mentions hour. It says, and he sent his servant at the hour of the supper to say to those having been called, be coming, because now are all things ready. Okay, just a light little icebreaker to start with at the hour of the supper. Okay, that's not mega evidence by itself, no, but it is one where it mentions hour, and combined with all the others that specify hour, there you go, right? But moving on, Revelation 3:10, this one's more important. This mentions the hour. It says, because, and Jesus is speaking to the assembly of Philadelphia, the only one of the Christian assemblies at the end days that actually got the theology right and didn't need to reform, obviously, because they were reforming. They're the only ones that weren't rebuked for not reforming. And this is the only assembly that Jesus says he will rescue from the earth. And I think this assembly just represents those who are obeying God and Jesus properly. It's not specific to a church or whatever, you know what I mean? But anyways, those things we're not going to fuss about for this video. But it says, because thou did keep the word of my endurance, so I will keep thee from the hour of the trial that is about to come upon all the world, to try those dwelling upon the earth. So again, we have another verse that says it's going to be an hour. So in the first one, it was called the hour of the supper, which we know is about the end days and Jesus coming here for his bride and all of that. And then here we have the hour of the trial. Okay. Next in Revelation 14:7, this is a verse that mentions hour. It says, saying in a great voice, fear ye God and give to him glory, because come to the hour of his judgment, and bow ye before him who did make the heaven and the land, the sea, and the fountains of waters. Okay, so hour of the supper, hour of the trial, hour of his judgment. Okay, he has all opportunity to say days, weeks, months, years, but it's called the hour in each of these cases. Going on in Revelation 9:15, this one's more specific. Again, it mentions hour, and this is just one of the this is the 5th or the 6th trumpet. It says, and loosed are the 4 messengers who have been made ready for the hour, the day and month and year, that they may kill the third of men. So as I pointed out before, this is showing you that this day is prescribed by God, the specific day and even the specific hour that all these events are going to unfold on. God has it pre-planned. Okay, and again, this mentions specifically an hour. Okay, next in Matthew 24:27. It says, for as the lightning does come forth from the east and does appear unto the west, so shall be also the presence of the Son of Man. Okay, so there's a hint at how quickly Jesus will arrive, but we already know all of that. But so far, all those verses so far show that these things will be taking place in an hour. This is the hour of the trial, hour of the supper, hour of the judgment, and so forth. Okay, Jesus will arrive like lightning. And then in Luke 17:24, for as the lightning that is lightning out of the one part under heaven to the other part under heaven does shine, so shall also be the Son of Man in his day. So I'm providing the scriptural basis for everything, and then I'll get into describing and illustrating what we'll see, right? Tangibly based on the scripture, what we will see rapidly unfolding when that end day comes, right? But first the verses, right? And then in 1 Thessalonians 4:16, because the Lord himself in a shout, in the voice of a chief messenger, and in the trump of God shall come down from heaven, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. So Jesus appears like lightning, rapidly like lightning. And when he arrives, it is the trumpet of God. And we know from Revelation 11, I believe it is, it mentions that it's at the 7th trumpet when this occurs that the resurrection, the translation, and the ascension all happen. Okay, so it's at the final trumpet. So because the Lord himself in a shout, in the voice of a chief messenger, and in the trumpet of God shall come down from heaven, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. So far, scripturally, we see that everything will be taking place in an hour, but when it gets to the point where Jesus himself arrives, like lightning, he will arrive, go across the earth. We know he's sending out and commissioning his angels to go seal and gather everybody. So all this will be taking place super quickly when he arrives. And when he arrives, it's the seventh, it's the final trumpet. So he's arriving perhaps towards the end of the hour, but we don't know exactly when in the hour time span everything happens. Maybe all the terrible events happen in 10 minutes and he arrives giving about 45 minutes to gather. We don't know, but it's all taking place in an hour. And whatever point Jesus does arrive, it's at the seventh trumpet, and his arrival, sending out of the angels, will be happening like lightning across the world. And during this gathering process, the resurrection occurs. And we're told in many verses that in the twinkling of an eye, I think I have these verses here somewhere, but in the twinkling of an eye, the dead will rise. In the twinkling of an eye, we will be changed, which is the translation. So twinkling of an eye and like lightning, all this is happening very, very quickly, right? So in John 5:25, it mentions hour. It says, "Verily, verily, I say to you, there cometh an hour, and it now is," well, sorry, actually, this isn't the right verse to read, but I do have another one. Here we go. It's John 5:28. Wonder not at this, because there does come an hour in which all those in the tombs shall hear his voice. Okay, that one's about the resurrection. The other one was just about spiritual rebirth, right? In 1 Corinthians 15:52. So keep that in mind again. So that verse talks about the resurrection taking place in this final hour. There does come an hour in which all those in the tombs will hear his voice. That is referencing this final hour when all the revelation events unfold, culminating with the seventh trumpet, the arrival of Jesus, resurrection, translation, and rapture. Okay? So in 1 Corinthians 15:52, in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, in the last trumpet, for it shall sound, and the dead shall be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. Okay, corroborating what I just said. Next, in Revelations 14:15, another verse that mentions hour. And another messenger did come forth out of the sanctuary, crying in a great voice to him who is sitting upon the cloud, Send forth thy sickle and reap, because come to thee as the hour of reaping, because ripe has been the harvest of the earth. So altogether here, the key terms: the hour of the supper, okay, the hour of the trial, the hour of his judgment, okay, in terms of actual specific terms. And we have other verses that mention hour as well. But let's see. Where's another hour one that has a specific term? And hour of reaping, that would be the fourth one then. Okay, so we have four specific terms, all indicating that, and all separately confirming, because we have four terms that all reference an hour, plus other verses that describe the end days events happening in an hour, right? So next one here in Luke 17:24 through 37. This one's longer, but it's important to read it all because it validates everything that I said. For as the lightning that is lightning out of the one part under heaven, which I read before, to the other part under heaven does shine, so shall also be the Son of Man in his day. And first it behooveth him to suffer many things and to be rejected by this generation. And as it came to pass in the days of Noah, so shall it be also in the days of the Son of Man. They were eating, they were drinking, they were marrying, they were giving in marriage, till the day that Noah entered into the ark, and the deluge came and destroyed all. So I just want to mention, this is what Jesus is telling us. We have a majority of Christians out there saying, no, we're going to get a buffer zone of 7 years of an Antichrist oppressing Christianity. That can't be true at all. It's not true. It's unbiblical. We have Jesus here saying that we're going to be eating, drinking, marrying, making merry, and living normal life until the sudden arrival. That's what Jesus, the Lord, told us, not what false prophets and charlatans are saying. It's the opposite. Okay, so the Antichrist, which did take place under Islam, created a currency with their spiritual mark on it, which you ascribe your soul to their God. And if you didn't buy or you couldn't buy or sell without it. Those things already took place in history, right? But Christians are thinking 7 years at the end of days, there's going to be an Antichrist figure, some new one who's going to come up and force Christians, and we won't be able to eat, and all this persecution they've been preaching for so long. But what does Jesus say? He says we're going to be eating and drinking and marrying and giving in marriage. That doesn't sound like we're under a 7-year Antichrist rule, does it? No. Thank you. Right? And it says, till the day that Noah entered into the ark, and the deluge came and destroyed all. In like manner also, as it came to pass in the days of Lot, they were eating, drinking, and they were buying and selling, and they were planting, they were building. And on the day Lot went forth from Sodom, he rained fire and brimstone from heaven and destroyed all. Okay? These are lessons that Jesus is giving us. And that's why Jesus goes on to say, according to these things, it shall be in the day the Son of Man is revealed. In that day, he who shall be on the housetop and his vessels in the house, let him not come down to take them away, and he in the field. In like manner, let him not turn backward. Remember the wife of Lot. Whoever may seek to save his life shall lose it, and whoever may lose it shall preserve it. I say to you, in that night there shall be two men on one couch, one shall be taken, the other shall be left. Two women shall be grinding at the same place together, the one shall be taken, the other shall be left. Two men shall be in the field, one shall be taken, and the other left. And the answering said to him, where, sir? And he said to them, where the body is, there will the eagles, the angels, be gathered together. Next, we have three more verses Jesus said, talking about the final hour. So in Revelation 18:10, from afar, having stood because of the fear of her torment, this is after all the woes, the seven trumpet seals and vials are unfolding upon the earth, right? They've lashed out. The final hour has taken place. All the wrath has been poured out. Well, wrath has been poured out. It says, from afar, having stood because of the fear of her torment, saying, woe, woe, the great city, Babylon, the strong city, because in 1 hour did come thy judgment. Next in Revelation 18:16, and saying, woe, woe, the great city that was arrayed with fine linen and purple and scarlet and gilded with gold and precious stone and pearls, because in 1 hour so much riches were made waste. And then in Revelation 18:19, it says, remember the two witnesses, and then by three witnesses all things are confirmed, so it's definitely an hour. And it says, and they did cast dust upon their heads and were crying out, weeping and sorrowing, saying, woe, woe, the great city, in which were made rich all having ships in the sea out of her costliness, for in 1 hour was she made waste. Okay, so altogether, like I said, we have 10 verses that I just read that specify that these things will be taking place in 1 hour. We have the terms hour of the supper, hour of the trial, hour of the judgment, and hour of the reaping. Okay, and we know that Jesus arrives at the seventh trumpet, which is the last of all the events. It's seventh. Okay, and when he arrives like lightning, super quick, sends out the angels like lightning, super quick, like eagles. They'll be gathered to everybody. And then that is when resurrection occurs as Jesus comes like lightning. The translation occurs, all this like lightning in the twinkling of an eye. And then the rapture occurs as well. So resurrection, translation, and rapture are all happening very quickly in the twinkling of an eye. And this is confirmed by all the scripture. Okay, so the end days events are going to be sudden. That's why Jesus said people will be saying peace and surety. It will be like the days of Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay, peace and surety, and then sudden destruction. Now that's the scriptural reality. Okay, so what are we actually going to see when it happens, right? So if you look at, like, I'm not going to make this video an hour long, right? So I'll refer people to all my videos, refer them to my book, or I have a whole chapter specifically showing all the Revelation verses, trumpet seals and vials, showing which ones are obviously talking about the same one thing, and I map it all out for everybody here. I'm not going to get into that, it takes too long, right? But all the trumpet seals and vials can basically be summed up as the vast majority of them are about meteors or space rocks hitting the earth. Okay, so the basic essence is that at the end of days, it's going to be a cosmic devastation. Okay, hail, meteors, space rocks, fiery heavens, and all that, skies turning red and fiery, pillars of smoke, the stars appearing to fall. So these are the things that we're told is going to happen. So it's going to be a cosmic destruction. And we know that meteors and such travel very quickly, like 50,000 miles per hour, I think it is. They go like 20 kilometers a second. It's ridiculous. So, if that is how the end is coming, that would be very, very quickly. Okay, and I've always said it makes perfect sense that if, meteors and all that always hit the earth and it happens in cycles and this and that there, God is the cosmic creator. He would know when these things are going to occur. He would know that, in the year 2024 or 2025 or whatever, that earth will be bombarded. So if God doesn't intervene, everybody on the planet will be wiped out, or most people will. So he's going to utilize that time as an end days judgment. It just makes perfect sense, right? It's more reasonable. It makes perfect sense. So I think that's what's happening. I think that the destruction is probably a natural order of events, and God is utilizing this time. But in either case, what are we going to see when it occurs? Well, if you're still alive for when that day occurs, maybe it occurs this year, maybe at the start of next year, but whenever it does occur, you're not going to have any forewarning that it's going to happen. The only forewarning, like I said at the start of the video, is certain nations, whoever they may be, will be attacking Israel and Jerusalem. Okay, now that type of thing could theoretically happen despite the end of days, but we are told that at the end of days, this will occur, right? So even if it could technically occur at other times, that is one of the first things, and that can only happen to a reborn Israel, right? Reborn reborn Israel was the first condition. So we have the first starting foundation layers already. Okay, and it took 2,000 years for Israel to be reborn, so you can't foo-foo that away under the rug and pretend it's nothing. That is major. Israel was reborn in 1948, and not only that, but opposing nations are attacking Israel even right at this day and moment. So you can't deny those things. The very next step to occur is they actually go out and attack Israel extremely bad, or attack and target Jerusalem specifically. But the real indicator is when the space rocks come down, because the trumpets, the seals, the vials, this is the easiest way to break them down. All of the trumpets, except for like one, talk about space rocks. Trumpet 1, 2, and 3 are literally meteors, asteroids, whatever they are, comets, whatever it might be, hitting the Earth. Now, if you go, then the fourth is just the sun and the moon being obscured by 1/3, which is the due result of space rocks hitting the Earth. So arguably, the first four trumpets are space rocks hitting the Earth. And the fifth trumpet is another space rock hitting the Earth, this one being far worse and causing the sun to go into blackness because of all the smoke and sediment that's cast up. So the first five trumpets are about space rocks hitting the Earth. The sixth trumpet is just specifically about fallen angels and legions of creatures or beings being released from crevice within the Earth that got exposed from the impact. Okay, so that's the only one that's not about a space rock hitting the Earth. But nonetheless, when you get to the seventh trumpet, which is the same as the seventh vial and seventh seal, like I said, it all describes the same events happening: voices in the heaven, thunders and lightnings, earthquake and great hail to finish everything off. And the great hail is the space rocks. So the seventh trumpet is space rocks hitting the Earth. So really, like I said, the seven trumpets are all about space rocks hitting the Earth. Now let's go quickly look at the seals. The first four seals are the four horsemen being released. They're not about space rocks hitting the Earth. And saving a long-winded explanation, which I get into in the book with the logical validation for it, the four horsemen, I believe, are released at the same time. In all the visions, they're seen marching together and blah, blah, blah. We don't need to get into that. They're released very, very quickly, like 1, 2, 3, 4, like all at once released. The fifth seal is just a moment of silence. It's a temporary pause. I think a prayer goes forth or whatever. So really speaking, the first five seals are kind of indirect things. They don't have directly to pertain. I know one of them is about war and one's death in Hades, but generally speaking, when you're picturing them in your mind, what they are, what the Bible describes them to be, they're not space rocks hitting the Earth and this and that. It's just the four horsemen being released, right? The first of which is Jesus, the one on the white horse going out to conquer. Jesus is the only one conquering at the end of days, in case anybody forgot. You know what I mean? The enemy is not conquering. And Jesus is described in Revelation 14 or 19 or 17, one of those chapters, as coming on a white horse to conquer. So it's definitely Jesus. Okay, the black horseman is said he handles the scales of discerning and justice. So when the angels going out sealing and gathering the people, I think that's reflected in the black horseman. Measure of wheat for a denarii and all of that there. Okay, then you have death and Hades. So anyways, the point is the first five seals we could put on the side because, they're just talking about those things. And I prove in the book that they actually happen very, very quickly at a specific time. Now, why is this? Because the sixth seal describes the exact events from the trumpets and the vials. Okay, so when the Earth goes into absolute darkness at the fifth trumpet, okay, because this giant space rock hits the Earth, it splits it open or whatnot, casts up all the sediment, the Earth goes into darkness, the sun is obscured, even the moon, there's no light. Okay, and at this point here, the space rocks are hitting the Earth, which are part of the trumpets. That exact scenario is the sixth seal, okay, which is the same as like the fifth vial or sixth vial, right? So like I said, they parallel, they're talking about the same events, the trumpet, seals, and vials at different times, right? So if we know that, Jesus and the rest of the the four horsemen, right? If they all arrive as this fleet to do each their own specific thing for God, right? Or however they work with death and Hades, these four are released as the first four seals. It has to happen in rapid succession because the sixth seal is it is the fifth trumpet. Okay. Now we know from all the other verses I read that Jesus arrives at the seventh trumpet. That's when he officially arrives here. Okay. Jesus also separately told us that when Israel's were born, he is nigh and at the doors waiting. So technically, up in the heavens now, Jesus and his legions could have been actually positioned up there waiting since 1948, because to God, a day is like 1,000 years. If they're up there for 1 hour, that's only like 41.6 years. That's nothing. Okay. So since 1948, it hasn't even been 2 hours, 2 divine hours. So Jesus and his legions could have been up there since 1948, observing the earth, watching the earth, sending watchers to go down and watch over and observe the earth, and waiting for that final due hour. Okay, and when that final hour is to come, you have the trumpet seals and vials all occurring at their due moment. When it gets to the first, when it's due for the first few seals to go out, to be unraveled or whatever, get opened, they go 1, 2, 3, 4 very quickly. The four horsemen come out together, as is commonly understood, the first of which being Jesus. He comes out to conquer, but he will wait for those final few trumpets to unfold because he has to come at the seventh trumpet, right? So that's what I'm saying. All of these events are probably happening very, very quickly. When the first few trumpets, the meteors and all that, they're coming down, crashing, hitting the earth, this could be happening very, very quickly. Okay, and during that short period, you have the seals being opened 1, 2, 3, 4. But Jesus is just going to wait a few more minutes or whatnot, literally, tangibly, probably 15, 20 minutes or something like that, a very brief period before coming to the earth. When he comes to the earth with the seventh trumpet, his process, like I spoke about already, is going to occur like lightning, super quickly. Okay, so what are we going to tangibly see? So when that day comes, we're not going to have any forewarning. And I thought about it, like the first few trumpets, unless you're living where that space rock hits the earth, you may not even know. You might be on the other side of the planet. You may not even know that meteors are starting to hit the earth. It may not have hit the news yet. The news may not have been able to respond and put it into international, global news and media. So I think when this occurs, if everything's happening in an hour, and if we have 7 stages to go through arbitrarily. Well, there are 7 stages. We don't know if they all happen super quick together or they're pacing, but just arbitrarily, you would have each one of the trumpets, seals, of vials, because they all happen, synchronized, like every 8 minutes. So arguably within 9 or 10 minutes, you would have the first 2 trumpets unfolding, which also means the first 2 vials as well, right? So again, refer to the book for the specific timings of everything. I'm not getting into nitpicky details here. But the basic essence is the first vial, if I'm not mistaken, is the plague on those of the mark of the beast, which is obviously coming from one of the space rocks where it gets unleashed upon the earth. Maybe it hits Antarctica, unleashes some virus or plague or something, or it brings the plague from space. But in either case, that's what's going to happen first. And it's not like when that thing hits the earth, everybody around the planet magically knows. So in those first 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 60, whatever it is, 20 minutes or so, before you even hear about it on the news, I think a lot of people on the planet might have no clue that the end days are unfolding. That's the crazy part. Even if you actually saw the space rocks, and even if they're big sailing across the sky, you might not see the impact or feel it, depending where you are on the world. When it gets to the 5th trumpet, that one is presumably big enough, probably for the world to feel it all, because it makes the world go into darkness. Whether you feel it or not, the planets can be sent into darkness. So, but if each of the trumpets arbitrarily is taking place every 8 minutes roughly, so that all 7 take place in the 1 hour span, you would basically have less than half an hour before the world goes into darkness, right? There will be lots of meteors hitting the earth, because if you read what the trumpets are, it's all about lots of meteors and space rocks hitting the earth, burning up all the green grass. They hit the oceans, they hit the waters, they kill things living in the water, okay? And that's going to be all happening within a half-hour time span. So unless you're living where those things are hitting, you might be oblivious to it being the end of days. Bolides and space rocks come down now and then, right? People see them, they catch them on video and put them on YouTube and stuff. So people might be oblivious. but they're only going to catch on when the whole planet goes into darkness suddenly, right? They might think, oh, is it an eclipse that we don't know about? They'll look up and they might not even have a clue why it's happening. Okay, that's the crazy part. But that's when things get scary, according to Revelation. When the earth goes into darkness, that's the fifth trumpet. Okay, at the fifth and the sixth trumpet is where creatures, demonic monsters, probably the Nephilim, the giants, and it specifically says the fallen angels are released. And they are released to kill, what's it say, 1/4 or 1/3 of mankind. That's billions of people, okay, in that hour. Okay, and that's something very dark and scary that will be taking place in actual darkness. We don't know how long that darkness will last for, but the point is we're told that all of this is taking place in an hour. Okay, so you might only get about 10 minutes, 30 minutes of space rocks hitting somewhere on the planet or spreading across the planet. You might not even see that disease, breaking out on those with the mark of the beast. We may not be where these things are happening, but suddenly the earth will be struck and will go into darkness. When that happens, you have to know that the scriptures warned us that all these hellish fiends are going to be released. Okay, and when that occurs, we are told in Revelation 9 and in Revelation 7 that the angels and God instruct those beings, the evil ones, that they cannot harm any of the chosen. Okay, the chosen will be sealed and rescued and taken away. So just like at the days of Sodom and Gomorrah when it was destroyed, like Jesus warned us, the angels will come to the righteous to rescue them before the space rocks utterly destroy everything. That's why Jesus literally said that is an example of a warning. Okay, he warned us with that example, of Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay, so that's what we're going to tangibly see. You might not see anything taking place at all. You might not even get to hear it on the news yet, because that would be like, what, a half-hour turnaround for something like that to happen? You might start to hear about it. You might see on the news, oh, a meteor has struck a city somewhere. You know what I mean? Or a meteor has collided into the ocean. You might see that type of thing. Now, most people may start to feel like, oh, it's the end of days. Maybe, maybe not. We don't know how big all of these space rocks are going to be, how prolific it will be, and all of that. We don't know how fast the plague on the mark of the beast will spread out across the earth. But one thing for sure is when the world suddenly goes into darkness, there'll be no mistaking it. Okay, and especially if there's giants and creatures and such running amok, the Nephilim, the fallen angels, the Anakim, and all those things running amok, then you're definitely going to know it's the end of days. But by then, it's too late. Okay, and by the time that happens, you're going to have arbitrarily less than half an hour. Okay, and if you're not taken out of there in that time, the time is up, right? So, like it says, the hour of the reaping in those verses that I read. So, in that hour when all these events are taking place, from the start to the very, very end, because remember, the first verse that I read from Revelation 3, Jesus said that he'll spare us from the hour of this trial. Okay, so all the big bad stuff's taking place in an hour. Those space rocks coming down, they're going to be falling 20 miles a second, 50,000 miles an hour. So all those space rocks hitting the earth could happen very, very quickly, like I said. Okay, it could be in minutes, may not even be half an hour. Okay, during this time, Jesus and the rest of the horsemen have been released. Okay, they're in their positions doing what they need to start doing. Then that next space rock goes bam, earth goes into darkness. You're not going to have time to prepare for this. You might not even see anything taking place until the whole world goes into darkness. Like I said, you might just think it's an eclipse, right? The fourth trumpet, when 1/3 of the sun goes dark, you think you might know that? I've been in the house a few times and it suddenly goes dark outside, and I jokingly think to myself, oh, is it the end of days? And I go out and it's just the sun's behind a dark cloud. So we won't really get any blatant signs, even with nations attacking Israel. I mean, hypothetically, that could just happen because of war. So the only direct sign that we're going to get as a planet, generally speaking, the vast majority of people, is when the earth goes into darkness and monsters are running around. By then, it's too late. You have to hope and pray at that point, because that's what my prophetic dream's all about. You have to hope and pray at that point that you're going to pass in judgment, right? So you got to get right with God now. Don't fall victim to all these false church dogmas and false dogmas of people. Get right with God and get scriptural, because at that moment there, it's going to matter whether Jesus was God or not. At that moment there, when it's darkness and the monsters and the giants are running around eating people and whatnot, it's going to matter whether Jesus was a blood sacrifice or not. Okay, it's going to matter whether you were formed from sin or not. All the key theologies of Christianity that God gave us through Jesus in the New Testament, all those things will matter because it's going to discern whether you're going to get saved or not. Okay, so that's why I'm urging everybody, get both of my books, The Evidence for When the End Days Will Occur and The True Theology of Christianity as is given in the actual original New Testament, in the original languages. So get right with God now. I only had a few sins left to myself to get ironed out because I don't want to fail at Judgment Day. I've successfully reformed from them in these last few days. I feel a lot better and more wholesome as a person. I've climbed that mountain to the peak and I'm coming down over the mountain now. I've resolved inside myself why I shouldn't do these things, why I must not do these things. Instead of just abstaining, I'm coming to conclusions within my soul why I don't want to do these things anymore. And the more you do that, you become more of a new creature who just doesn't want to do those things. That's what you need to do. You have to reform from sin, become a new creature, a new person. And unless you do that, I mean, the Bible says that's how you're saved, Old Testament, New Testament. So if you haven't done that, I mean, God might be able to forgive you if you got other aspects of theology wrong. But at the end of the day, if you haven't reformed, Jesus said he's going to turn sinners away, right? And you're going to have a lot of Christians up there who believed in the blood sacrifice of Jesus, for example, and they've been so enamored by this false theology that God came down as a human, coming out of a woman's private parts, that God came into the world as one of us to function as a sacrifice, right? So that's a satanic doctrine, right? God might be willing to forgive that, right? But at the end of the day, if you're still a bad person and you haven't reformed and you believe that, you may not be forgiven. I'm not the judge, but I'm just warning people, right? Even if you get theological aspects wrong, at the end of the day, the way to be saved is to reform. That is your true baptism of reformation to the remission of sins. The true gospel is to go out and teach all men everywhere to reform. Okay, God has overlooked the times of ignorance, like the scripture says, and now commands all men everywhere to reform. So you can't deny it. You got to reform. And that's the only thing that's going to keep you feeling safe when all those terrible things are unfolding. If you know inside, thankfully, oh, I gave up those sins. I stopped doing this. I stopped doing that. That's the only thing that's going to give you confidence, because you're going to have hundreds of millions or billions of Christians out there thinking, oh, I'm saved by the blood sacrifice of Jesus. But what if that gets you left behind? So, for your own soul's sake, go examine the true theology, okay? And go examine the evidence for the end days. But anyways, God bless you all, folks. And just warning, like I said, it's all going to take place in an hour. Probably thankfully, you know what I mean? That's probably a good thing. And we're not going to have any time to prepare. It's just going to be sudden. So, I'm on vacation right now. You know what I mean? What if it happens today? I've got things planned that I want to go do today. You know what I mean? Go build a house for my chickens and stuff like that there. Go for a drive. Go help my mom do something. I have all these things planned. But what if it happens today? All I can say is thank God I at least reformed from those last bad sins I did in the last few days. So anyways, I got to get going. So take care, folks, and God bless. See you all later.